All right, guys, welcome back to the channel. After yesterday's extreme euphoria of Bitcoin hitting $100,000, some of the best news that we have ever heard coming through from the US government about Bitcoin, we now get it. The largest crash that Bitcoin has had since the September higher low, all the way back nearly 90 days ago. So I've got lots more about what's going on for Bitcoin and altcoins in today's video. Make sure you hit that like button now and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It's your home of macro cycle analysis, going through the stock markets, the real estate cycle, Bitcoin, and cryptocurrencies, bringing it all together so you guys have a vast understanding of the financial markets and how it all comes together. We've got an agenda today, lots on Bitcoin and altcoins, but of course we need to recap the stock markets as well. I'll do that at the beginning, and then of course get onto some of the charts for the altcoins. So, the news. Bitcoin yesterday had huge news from Trump, says you're welcome after Bitcoin leaps over $100,000. Why was he saying you're welcome? Bitcoin tops 100 grand after Trump picks crypto-friendly SEC chair. So it's something that everyone had been waiting for. They were waiting for Gary Gensler to get out of the SEC. And now we've got a crypto-friendly SEC chair. So some of the best news that you would expect for Bitcoin and cryptos at this stage of the cycle. Fed chair likens Bitcoin, so now this is Jerome Powell, to gold. He's saying Bitcoin is like gold, says it's not a rival to the dollar. So not only have we got the best people now in the SEC that are going to be crypto friendly, you've got Trump talking about it, saying you're welcome. You know, of course, Trump saying that this is his doing. And now we've got the Fed chair also comparing Bitcoin to gold, which is a great thing. You don't want to see it rival the dollar as such, especially for the US government. Maybe you and I wanted to see it rival the dollar, but in terms of the gains for this cycle, yeah, comparing it to Bitcoin or comparing it to gold, that is Bitcoin to gold, is a great thing that we want to see. Three massive pieces of good news, which have now led to Bitcoin topping and correcting around 12% in a matter of hours. And so I've got a little quote up here, you know, Trump talking about 100K, you're welcome, and then he appoints the SEC. Jerome Powell saying Bitcoin is gold, and then Bitcoin goes on this pump and a dump. What typically happens with these sorts of events, if I can find my chart here, you got some good news, but then if the market goes down on good news, it's not necessarily the greatest sign, at least in the short term. So just the short term. So I don't want to get through first. The good news, why the dump? If you typically see the price fail, so price come down on good news, you would expect that there might be a little bit of weakness coming up. So I don't want to send any alarm bells. The macro is still up, as we'll get to in a moment, but you don't want to see the markets correct like this. However, the silver lining here is this white line through the middle. You can see the close of yesterday's bar that was now at $97,000. It comes in above the swing top here. It's trying to hold the ground above the previous swing tops on the 2nd of December. We're down to a 4-hour chart here, mind you, just on the swing top here of 28th of November. So why is that line important? Well, we saw a fair bit of support, and then we saw resistance. Yes, it did rise over, but it came back down pretty quickly within that same swing. Tried again, failed, tried again, failed. So at least in the short term, this is some sort of good news. It could lead to a short-term rise. That might be helpful. But if you were to see a short-term rise and then it fail again, that could potentially be the folks who are sort of shitting the bed here and attempting to get out on the price rising. You know, the bounce off this pretty significant low, the liquidations were extremely high. We've seen $1 billion liquidated in the last 24 hours. This is the biggest liquidations we have seen in the last 6 months. So we have not seen anything more than that. And I dare say it probably goes all the way back to March in terms of how big the liquidations were. So with that in mind, you might get a dead cat bounce and a rally to the top. Right? That's in the short term, and then you potentially see a little bit further downside. Now, that's not the end of the world because we're still looking just at the short term here. If there was a bigger correction, great. You got your 91,000s, and then you've also got all the way back to 88,000s, and then again back to $85,000. So if we throw it up onto the daily chart here, going from your low to your high, the 50% level now comes in at roughly $85,000, and the correction overall would be about 18% down to that 50% level. So 18% is pretty straightforward for BTC. You can see the previous correction, as I said in the intro, this at the moment at 12% is the largest correction we've seen since the September higher low. This time here had extreme fear on X, not extreme fear on the fear and greed index, but a lot of people were expecting this particular move to fail again and go below August. It didn't, and that was your extreme signal to the upside that you had a lot of fear, yet it was a higher price, just like the way we found the lows in the market back in 2022 and then March of 2023. Extreme fear, and the market went higher. That's exactly what you want to see. Now we're seeing something in the opposite, but it's only short term. Extreme greed, extreme euphoria, and it's peaked, and we had a correction on that. So these things are okay. In terms of the correction itself, if it was to go down, that's around 18%. We've seen 19% here. And throughout this particular cycle, we've seen days like this before. You got 14% in the short term here. This is back in March. It rallied a little further, and then we had that 7.5 month period underneath those old all-time highs. We'll get to that in future videos should we see further signals come up like the 3-day rule. Going back to December and January of last year, so 12 months ago, pretty similar looking stuff here. You've got December, exactly 12 months ago, so a nice anniversary there. And the correction was 10% from your 8th down to the 11th, so right around that 12-month anniversary. The other corrections within this period were, well, 12% and 15%. I'm only just looking at the 1 to 2 day-ish corrections so that we can get a gauge of whether the market is doing something extraordinary or if it's doing something similar to what it's already done throughout this move to the upside, basically from this breakout of October. Now, to settle the nerves just a little bit more, because most of the game is about trying to hang in there in these bull markets, as we've said many times, these moves get more volatile. And because the emotions come in, I hear it all the time, day after day, whether it's on X or YouTube or in person, when I'm at the gym, people are just getting a little bit strung up about the movements themselves, because some people haven't got in yet, and any sort of movement to the downside is a hit to the money that they've just put into the markets. But have a look at the previous cycle. We saw 20% basically in a day, 24-hour period, top to the low there's 20%. Going back again into January, you had 28%. Within another 24-hour period, you had 20%. Going through to November, you had another 24-hour period of roughly 17%. So it's just a lot of flush outs here with the higher lows forming. Eventually, yes, there will be the time where the market does come back down and pretty much wipe out a lot of people. Like we saw on that fateful day in May of 2021, we had like 20,000 people on our live stream. That was at nighttime, and basically the market just tanked all the way down 30-odd% and fortunately bounced back at that point. Now, if we still need to settle a few more nerves, we can go back to the cycles that look pretty similar to what I think is happening at the moment in our 2024-2025 cycle. We've got 2016, 2017. You were reaching up to previous old all-time highs. So here it is, there's the tops, and this is the area. And in terms of those percentages, you got 27% in a day, a really wild swing. This particular news was on bad news, which is to be expected. People are still fearful of what's going on in the market as it hadn't cleared an all-time high yet. 27% in a day. You had a roughly 30% in a 2-day period here, putting in a higher low from the entire trend and then continuing to climb higher, more higher lows, so on and so forth, and then going back through to 2013. Same sort of thing here. I'm just looking at how these moves happen within a day and what happens after that. You might have a little bit more of a correction here, and we've identified the support levels that Bitcoin could get to and still remain in an uptrend. And that's essentially what's happened here. You're seeing similar sort of things with the corrections. The price remains in the uptrend and then continues on, but it does enough to wash out that liquidity. And back in the old days of Bitcoin, prior to sort of 2020, even more so in 2017, 2013, you had a lot less liquidity in the market than what you do now. So it's natural that we would see less percentage drops, so smaller drawdowns of what we're seeing now, but nonetheless, there's still enough there to wipe out the liquidity in the markets to then reset into this bull market. So the good news, why the dump? Well, that's a big reason why I think there was a dump. A lot of good news came out on a breakout into a new all-time high. Plus, we had $100,000. Like, that's news on its own. These were all the headlines. And essentially, yesterday, I think it's always important to be prepared. So at the time, yes, I know people just want to get excited about 100K Bitcoin. At the end of the day, you do what the hell you want. It's your money. For me, I'd rather be prepared, as I said here, not worried, just being prepared, because any of these sort of moves to the downside can really unsettle the emotions if you don't have a plan or if you're not prepared for anything like that. So I know it might have just been a bit of a mention at the time, but I just want to be prepared. Like we said, if the market came back down and closed under these levels, that would be something to be worried about. That's a weaker signal. Right now, we're trying to overcome that again with the 4-hour chart, climbing back above roughly 97, 98K. Now, just as the biggest bubbles get going, we often see the wipeouts. So this is looking at the macro. There's still further to go. We've covered that with the real estate cycle. Prices continue to go higher. We had new all-time highs for the stock markets that we see across the globe at the moment. But in terms of the short term, this little pattern is playing out at the moment. This is something I talked about on the video a couple of days ago now, looking at the pop-off here to the upside, and then the movement back down. And you often see this because the market is just grinding that little bit higher and it comes back down. Look what's happened just over the last couple of hours here with the move to the upside, the move back down, just to try and squash out those late players, the late runners who are entering the market on these next moves to the upside. Overall, the trends are still up, even if we do get a correction, which could be a healthy place for the market to correct across sort of this period now, or as we've been talking about, roughly around early Q1. We'll get these words out properly. S&P 500 against BTC has been a pretty good sign that the bull market is on. So if we do get the correction, a bit of instability, a bit of volatility for the S&P, maybe we'll start to see that with BTC as well. That could be starting around now. We'll keep following up with the charts. Obviously, we've seen that with Bitcoin down 12%, and now in the short term, S&P basically grinding to a halt at these all-time high prices. Something else that is quite interesting here is MicroStrategy. Now, we had that all-time high for Bitcoin. Let's bring that chart over here. You got the all-time here on the 22nd, and then yesterday we just had another new all-time high. So higher highs. What has MicroStrategy done? It's put in lower highs. Remember, we talked about this in a video a few days ago, potentially last week, where I said, look what happened to MicroStrategy in the last bull market cycle. Here is the Bitcoin line. So the pink line in the background is BTC. You've got the top in April and then the higher high in November. So that was the new all-time high at 69K above 65. But what was MicroStrategy doing that whole time? It was putting in lower highs and then basically a double top before it collapsed. So I know there are a lot of people who might be trading MicroStrategy. So if you're trading it in and out, different story. You do you, stick to your plans. If you're trying to buy this thing now and hold it long term, just watch the pattern. We've talked about this before. This is why I suggest subscribing to the channel, so that hopefully you can implement some of this stuff into your own strategies, do your own research, and hopefully save yourself some money as opposed to just sort of following the herds. If this was the top for MicroStrategy, well, you'd definitely be seeing the price fail and not make a new all-time high. Something similar to what happened in 2021, 2022. However, if it is going to break to a new all-time high, you want something like that to happen. Something like that to happen early this year in 2024, where you're seeing some higher lows form. There was a fake out and then a push higher that broke through the tops. So call it the bearish scenario to the downside would be invalidated with higher lows and then a breakout above particular tops that are yet to be formed. The only one we really have at the moment is around $550. But if you're just following this chart as a bit of a precursor for the market, that's something interesting to pay attention to, that MicroStrategy has done a pretty big move up already. If it's unable to break past those highs, that would be telling us that we're probably, well, we believe we're all in that sort of last 6, 12, maybe 18 months in the cycle. This could be the beginning of that period, just like what happened from February through to November before the fateful collapse. And MicroStrategy went down roughly 90% in that time. That period, they were collecting a lot of money. They were putting together bonds and all sorts, billions and billions of dollars to put into the market. The same thing is occurring at the moment at this sort of $90,000, $100,000 level. It's not an overnight trade signal. It is just something to watch, as I said, around that sort of 6 to 12 month period, maybe if we're extremely lucky, something like 18 months into 2026. But of course, we'll continue to cover that on the channel. If you do want to learn more about this, how to implement it into your own trading, not waiting for the next cycle. It's a big comment that I see from a lot of people that are here in 2020, 2021, and now they're trying to get into the markets in 2024. I suggest taking a look at TIA Premium. You can get into the Discord using the link in the top of the video description. Check out the Discord, check out all the results, people talking about their results and how they're trading using the TIA strategies. And you can also check out some of the updates that we are posting here in the group, along with the mini masterclasses. That is all from this top link here. Back to the charts here for BTC. Now we're looking at the market sentiment. Bitcoin's the blue line, and that has just hit another fresh high for the last 60 days. So it's at 100 and just starting to drop off now in the last few hours. The yellow line is XRP. That has been down now for the last several days after peaking out there on the 2nd. And then the red line is on the way up. So that's an interesting one to look at now with the altcoins as Bitcoin has corrected. Fear and greed index also dropped off a little here from extreme greed down to greed. So 84 down to 72. As we said, this can remain elevated for a considerable amount of time. And so far, rising up into the extreme greed from roughly around the 7th of November and calling it a failure here on the 6th, about a month so far. So the shorter term, we've seen those months before, like we saw in 2020. Here it is in that sort of August period. And then through November into February, we had a lot longer at those highs. So nothing really different at this time to be overly concerned about. As for the USDT dominance, this one is quite interesting where we got to the 3.8%, faked out to the downside, and now is closed above. So it's taking quite some time here to break down. And this is that big area that I'm looking for more of that money to flow back out into Bitcoin and altcoins. And as we did at 4.2%, it was an absolute slow grind down to the low. So if this is a support level that is going to hold for the USDT dominance, this could be that area or that time now where you start to see some of the profits come back from BTC and maybe some of the other larger altcoins and come up to test the previous support and potentially become resistant. So we're watching out for any sort of bounce here to roughly 4.2. So it's not the end of the world. It's kind of like something, a little bit of a small profit taking for many people, as you can see from this particular chart. However, if this fails, breaks down and closes underneath 3.8, and now that final low here of yesterday at 3.7, that could bring on a little further downside. So more of that flush of money into altcoins. If you're trading altcoins, you need backup exchanges. Sometimes they go down, sometimes they pause when there's volatility, like we saw yesterday. Links in the video description for our channel sponsors, Bybit, Bluffin, and CoinCatch. If you want no KYC exchanges, I suggest checking out Bluffin and CoinCatch. Otherwise, you've got a debit card with Bybit as well. So don't wait for the volatility to come back. Set the exchanges up now, because when things do get crazy, there is often a long delay in opening exchange accounts. And the last thing you want to do is be sitting on the sidelines, FOMOing, wishing you were into something that you needed to speculate on. Okay, back to the altcoin analysis. The true altcoin market cap in this case, as it excludes the stable coins, still trading above $900 billion and still above the previous top of $800 billion as well. So with that flush out of BTC that we saw yesterday, down 12%, we really haven't seen the same sort of corrections on many of the other altcoins, which have been holding their ground. As I said, this could be a short-term correction here for BTC, whether it's a matter of days or weeks. We'll get to that in the next videos once we get a little more data coming out from today. But for the altcoins, pretty good sign here that you didn't see a major collapse like we've seen this year when Bitcoin started heading down, or like that major collapse in May of 2021. So far in the short term, it's been relatively stable. And you can see that as well with the ETH BTC chart coming down and closing higher. So that's a good sign here for ETH and the altcoins coming back. This could be that period where, you know, Bitcoin just continues to churn out, maybe put in another higher low, and that continues to bring on more money back into altcoins at this stage, especially as we see that with ETH BTC. ETH USD has also held up there as well. You got a nice reversal and then still closes above 3,700, which were the previous tops. As for the volume, we got a pretty high volume bar here, but the close was above the previous swing top. So I know it feels like a bit of a cop-out. I think about it myself as well if I was explaining this to someone else, but we still need a little more data from this point. If this was a close yesterday beneath these levels, that would be much easier to say that, well, there's a lot more weakness here. But because of the higher volume and the higher close, you're starting to see a little bit more buying come in than normal. So that's why we need a couple more days data to see whether this is able to hold out or if it starts to slip down, whether it's true buying or just a dead cat bounce. So far with the last 24 hours, it seems absolutely okay for the short term. And the other thing I'm seeing is altcoins pushing higher against their BTC values, like in the case of SUI, breaking past all-time highs. Yes, we'll call it at least cycle highs for now, but I think we're going to get to a new all-time high. So if we take out this massive, ridiculous bar on a launch day, you're looking for somewhere around 4,700 to 5,000 Satoshis for a breakout there into new all-time high territory. But for SUI USD, we did see a new all-time high yesterday when Bitcoin corrected. SUI pushed up with strong volume, as we saw with the SUI BTC chart, also showing strength there. It's had its correction, the average corrections between 20 and 30%. So everything's looking relatively good here, besides how short that timing is. It's getting a little bit shorter, which means you're probably going to see bigger blow-off moves and then the significant corrections from there. Render also did something similar yesterday, big blow-off move here, hitting the 200% mark of the entire range from the bottom. Big volume. Good news is that it closed higher, but you still need to see it consolidate and actually break past these tops at roughly, $11.50, $12, so it can attempt to get back to that previous cycle top there at $13.60. Now, I also said I had DOGE in the mix here. It looks like it's just grinding higher again. You can see from some of these major coins that have a lot of trading volume, they weren't really phased by the correction on Bitcoin yesterday. And Bitcoin also doesn't seem overly phased as yet. Great to see the huge liquidations coming through and Bitcoin able to hold up with the close, and also the altcoins able to hold their gains through this entire period. And finally, for you guys that love the numbers coming together, check out where Bitcoin topped yesterday. You've got the 5th of December, roughly 30 days from that significant November low before the US election. Go back another 30 odd days to this low here. So there's about 60 days from this day. That one there was your October low. People got freaked out that the market was going to go lower again, and it didn't. Go back 90 days to that September higher low from the bottom. So that's a really excellent point to continue to add to positions there. That's 90 days from this top. And then go back 120 days, you got the August low. So the market is doing that same thing again, where it likes to have significant turns roughly every 30 days. So it wouldn't surprise me if this was just another local top or a local turning point, and then eventually we got going over the coming weeks. Like and subscribe to the channel. Check out the links for TIA Premium and the free report and masterclass, and I'll see you guys back here at the next video. Take care.